In this video I want to show you how to make a simple calculator using Python code. Now it is very basic and probably not what you'd expect from a normal calculator, but I'll show you how it's going to work. The user needs to enter in two numbers, so we'll enter in the first one as 20. When we enter the second number we'll put 30, and then it asks us do we want to add, subtract, divide or multiply these numbers. So I'm just going to click on add, press enter, and it gives me the answer. Number 1 plus number 2 equals 50. Alright, now the same thing would happen if you needed to subtract, divide or multiply. Obviously you'll just get a slightly different response. Okay, I'm not going to show you how to do that now, but what I will show you how to do is how to make the app. So let's go into Python and make ourselves a new blank file. I'm just going to close off the shell. Alright, now once we've got a blank file, the first thing we need to do is we need to get the two numbers from the user and store them in variables so we can then perform the calculation on the two numbers. Okay, so I'm going to make two new variables here. One of them is going to be called number 1. Okay, there's no spaces in variable names, so make sure when you write number 1 it's all one word. And that variable number 1 is going to be equal to, we're going to make an input statement. Okay, so we're going to get some feedback from the user. Enter the first number is what we'll say. Put a colon at the end, a space, close the quotation marks, and then the bracket. Okay, so all that line is saying is enter the first number. When the user types in the first number, it is stored inside the number 1 variable. Okay, now at the moment, when the user inputs something, they could write in text, they could write in numbers, either or, they're both going to get stored in number 1 here. We don't want that to happen. We only want numbers to be stored. Okay, and if the user tries to type in some text, then we want an error message to pop up. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to convert whatever the user writes in here into an integer. Okay, so before the word input, just write in int, so int, that's short for integer. Open up a bracket, and then at the very end close off another bracket. Okay, so whatever the user types in now for their first number, it will be converted into an integer, and then it will be stored in the number 1 variable. Okay, if they try to type in text, they'll just get an error message. Let's do the same again for the next line. So I'm just going to copy that and paste it below. And I'm going to change the variable name from number 1 to number 2, and we're just going to change this to say enter the second number. Alright, pretty easy. Okay, we'll save that on the desktop there or wherever you are saving your files, and we're just going to call it calculator, and we'll keep rolling. So we've got the two variables getting the two numbers from the user. What we're going to do next is work out whether the user wants to add, subtract, multiply or divide. So we need to make yet another variable called operator. Okay, and the operator is going to be equal to another input. So the user is going to type in some more information, and we'll write in a question, do you wish to add, subtract, multiply or divide these numbers? Put a colon, space, quotation marks, and a bracket to finish off with. Okay, so the user now has the option to do one of those 4 things. Depending on what they type in, will affect the next part. Okay, so we need to use an if statement here to work out what to do with the two numbers. So the first one we're going to look at is we're going to write in if operator equals add. Close your quotation marks and put a colon in. So this is basically saying if the user in this line here types in the word add, okay, what do we want to do? So we're going to go down to the next line and we're going to create another variable called answer, and the answer is going to be equal to number 1 plus number 2. So if we see the word add appear, what it does is it goes back over to the first couple of lines, finds number 1 and number 2, and it simply adds them together. The answer will be stored in a variable called answer. Okay, now this answer is not displayed on the screen yet, so that is our next step. So we'll go on to the next line and put in a print command. Open up quotation marks inside the brackets there. The first thing we're going to do is just type in \n. that just makes a new line for whatever we're writing next. And we're just going to write in number 1 plus number 2 equals, close your quotation marks, put a comma, and write in the word answer. And then close your bracket. Okay, so we'll print in number 1 plus number 2 equals the answer from this calculation. Alright, so I think that's going to be working. Let's press Ctrl S to save it and then F5 to run it. Okay, so it says enter the first number, we'll put in 5, enter the second, 10. Now all I've written in so far is what happens when we add. So let's see what happens when we write in add. There's number 1 plus number 2 equals 15. Perfect. Okay, so far our calculator is working. But what I want to do now is we need to work out what to do if the user types in subtract, multiply or divide. So we don't write another if statement. This time we write an elif statement. So else if. Okay, so I've looked at if the operator writes in add. If the operator is equal to add. Okay, but if it's not, we come down here. So else if operator equals subtract. Now you might notice that we're using two equal signs here. When you're asking a question, which we are in this case, okay, you use two equal signs. So if our operator is equal to subtract, put in a colon and go down. And I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I'm just going to copy these two lines of code that we've already written, the answer and the print code, just above it. And this time the answer is not going to be equal to number 1 plus number 2. It'll just be number 1 minus number 2. And we're going to print out number 1 minus number 2 equals the answer. Alright, I'm going to copy all of that new little section, so the elif operator equals, and I'm going to put it below. And this time, let's do multiply. This time the answer will be number 1 times. We use a little asterisk for the times symbol. So number 1 times number 2, and we're going to print in number 1. I'm just going to put the lowercase x times number 2 equals that. And the last thing we need to do is we need to change, actually it's not the last thing yet, sorry, it's second last thing. Let's put in one more elif operator here, and it's going to be for divide. So if our operator equals divide, then we're going to get number 1 divided by number 2. We use a forward slash for that. Okay, and we print number 1 divided by number 2 equals the answer. Alright, so that's pretty straightforward. And the last thing we need to do is just put in an error message in case the user types the wrong thing in. So we'll just write in else. And don't forget the colon next to else there. And we'll put in a print statement. Open your brackets and quotation marks. We'll make a new line first of all. So \n. It says you have entered an invalid response. Close the quotation marks and close your brackets. Alrighty, so that's looking pretty good. Let's give it a go and we'll see how it works. F5 to run it. Enter the first number, we'll say 50, 100 for the second. Let's try and subtract. We should get 50 for our answer. There we go, number 1 minus number 2 equals minus 50. Oh yeah, so 50 take away 100. We're into the negatives there, that's alright. Let's run it again and we'll try some multiply. So 3, 4, multiply. Oops. And we get number 1 times number 2. Yep, 12, that's all looking good. And one last test, so we'll put in 20, and then 5, and we'll divide them, and we get 4. Perfect. Okay, so our code is working, but what I want to do is just add a little bit more depth to it. Okay, and it's in the if section. Okay, so let's look at the first one. It says here, if the operator equals add. That means if the user typed in the word add, then we can perform the following calculations. Now sometimes people like to use capital A's. They might like to use just the plus sign. So what we're going to do here is we're going to write in or after that, and we'll write operator equals, and we'll put add with a capital D. Alright, And the last one we might do is just write OR operator equals in quotation marks the plus sign. Okay, so now the user can type in add with lowercase letters, add with a uppercase first letter, or they can just simply type in the plus sign. Let's go give it a go. Control S to save, F5 to run, 50, and 10. Let's try and do a plus with just the plus sign. There we go, that works. So number 1 plus number 2 equals 60. Alright, so that's looking good. Let's just change this up over here. So I'm going to copy those new ones we put in and paste it down here next to subtract. So, OR operator, we'll put subtract, or operator is equal to the negative or the minus sign. Let's go down and do the same for the multiply. Okay, so if they type in a multiply, let's copy this, or the operator equals multiply with a capital M, or the operator is equal to an asterisk. Okay, answer is that. Yep. And let's do the same for divide. So if the operator ends up being with a capital, we'll take care of that. And we'll also do a / for the operator. Alrighty, so I think we are all good now. I'm going to save that, press F5, and hopefully that it all works. 50, 25, divided by, yep, that looks good. We might run a few tests here just to make sure it's all working. So we've got that one all good. We'll put in 10, 20, multiply 1 times 2. Yep. So we are looking pretty good now. So that is our code right there to make a simple calculator using Python code.